It's a world where nobody works. Everyone on the street has nothing to do. But they're happy even if they have nothing. Maybe it's because there's no pressure to work. A woman came to a building. But she's not looking for a job. She's just looking for an empty space to sleep. It's very cozy. Grandpa asked 3 kids what they wanted to be in the future. They all agreed that they wanted to be Earth players. Because then they could travel the world. Not only are there no workers in this world, even the ants don't work, and they're the most numerous ants. They're wanderers in the forest. All they do is eat and sleep. And they can reproduce better than human beings. Without the pressure of work, people often lie comfortably in the grass. The man recently wanted to create a robot that could work for him for free. But halfway through the construction, the robot broke down. It seems that even robots can't work for others in this world. If you have something to do today, you can leave it for tomorrow. It's a blessing for procrastinators. If you lived in this world, wouldn't you feel very comfortable too? Missy never dreamed that her husband would dare to eat a $1,500 lunch. What's worse, there's a woman's handkerchief in the photo. It must be because of that incident that she provoked him. Akita's father sent a bunch of mushrooms. So he made a mushroom dinner. But Hiroshi wasn't happy about it. It turned out to be the same dish she ate for lunch. The next morning, Missy asked her husband to take pictures of her lunch. So she wouldn't have to repeat her dinner. Missy is better than most women at this. She waited all morning for a text message from her husband. Just so Hiroshi could have a delicious dinner after a hard day's work. Finally, it was time for a break. Watching her subordinates taking pictures, Hiroshi says it's like they've never met. But the next moment, he remembered his wife's advice. He had no choice but to take a picture of the window. Meanwhile, Missy, who had been waiting for a long time, saw her husband's lunch. When she zoomed in, she realized that it was an expensive restaurant. Actually, Missy is the least qualified to say that. Because she always ate out with Shin while her husband was at work. At night, he would look at the same old food. Hiroshi thought it was pointless to pass on photos, because that trendy coffee and lunch, there was no way to tell what kind of food it was. When Missy opened it, she realized that her husband had not only resent a clear picture. He even said that the minister was buying. It seems that he knows that his wife is cheap. He thought that if he brought his own food on the 3rd day, there wouldn't be any problem. But the minister was called at short notice. He had to discuss a proposal with a client, so he had to eat out for lunch. When he got home, Missy accused him of not letting his co-workers eat it. But Hiroshi thought it was his wife's lunch. He thought it was his wife's lunch, so he couldn't let anyone else eat it. So he decided to have it for dinner. But Missy didn't want her husband to eat cold food after a hard day's work. So she brought me some mackerel with miso sauce. But she didn't realize that the dish was exactly the same as the lunch. I wondered if the couple had conspired in advance. In the end, Hiroshi chose to eat his lunch. Although this happened 3 days in a row, Missy is trying her best to be a good wife. Hiroshi is also working hard for the family. Do you envy this family? How outrageous were the enlisted medical exams in the early years of the military? On the surface, it looked like a formal medical checkup, but in reality, it was just a formality. This duck could pass even if his beak and feet didn't pass the test. But what's even more outrageous is the color blindness test. The answers were written on all the colors.
What color is this red card?
And the ear test was to use an alarm clock to see if there was something wrong with his ears. I'm afraid he won't be able to hear it if I hold it away from him. Then the doctor brought something to check his brain. There was nothing in it. But it doesn't matter, as long as he has all his limbs. After passing the medical checkup and measuring the duck's uniform size, they threw in a set of clothes. If the suit doesn't fit, a dish of cold water will automatically shrink it to the right size. Once everything was done, the duck was stamped as qualified and sent to the training camp. This duck came to the army thinking he'd be able to fly airplanes in no time. But he's been here for months and he hasn't even touched an airplane. He was complaining angrily. But he didn't expect the officer to call out attention. But Duck, who was distracted, didn't hear him. The angry officer shouted at him to stop him. Caught off guard, the duck was startled. Looking at him, the officer ordered him to turn around. But the nervous duck accidentally cut the officer's tie. At that moment, the officer ordered the other soldiers to disband. He decided to give the duck a special training. Knowing that he had angered the officer, the duck got serious. But the more he tried to get the instructions right, the more mistakes he made. Not only did he get his steps wrong, he even got his stance wrong. Seeing this, the officer was furious. He slapped him and knocked him to the ground. And the duck was furious at being treated like that. He said he was quitting. But when the officer heard this, he immediately took off his clothes and picked up his fists.
What was that?
Then the officer put on his clothes and came to the duck. He asked him to stand in the military position for a few hours without moving. Otherwise, he would be responsible for the consequences. This duck was told by the officer to stand here and not to move. But he stepped on an ant's nest. All of a sudden, his whole body was crawling with ants. He wanted to scratch the itch. But he was suddenly discovered by the officer, so he had to stop. But although he couldn't move his arms and legs, he was lucky to have his tail to repel them. But to his surprise, one of them crawled into his mouth. It even tried to get into his nostrils. In a moment of desperation, he was able to squeeze a drop of sweat from his forehead. And he was able to get rid of it. But his buttocks were in even worse shape. In the end, he couldn't take it anymore, so he jumped up and started shooting with his gun. Watching him shoot indiscriminately, the officer was so scared that he fled to a tree. But it didn't work. He blew his whistle to stop the ducks, but they didn't stop. In the end, without incident, the duck was assigned to peel potatoes in the kitchen. And his dream of becoming a pilot was dashed. How strange is this caterpillar? He makes screaming noises. It's even a national protected species. When he appeared on The Simpsons, it was like hell. Homer gave his wife a Chinese pond for their anniversary. The pond is exquisitely crafted and detailed. The pond was stocked with carp. Marge was delighted with the gift. Just when she was happy, there was a scream.
Ah! What was that?
It turned out to be a caterpillar. Homer is quickly attracted to the scream. He immediately grabbed the bug and tried to kill it. At that moment, a security officer appeared and told them it was a rare and endangered species. If you kill them or die in Simpson's house, they'd go to jail. But the bug's predators are everywhere. The family is forced to take on the task of protecting it. The Simpsons have a caterpillar. He's an endangered and rare species, and the family has to take on the task of protecting him. It's late at night and the caterpillar is still screaming. Marge tried to feed it with a few drops of dishwashing liquid. It causes him to vomit violently. The caterpillar lives a miserable life here every day. And then the family dog got him in his mouth again. Luckily, Bart showed up just in time. He came up with a solution. He exchanged the caterpillar with the dog for a kitten. At night, Homer had to read the caterpillar a bedtime story. The caterpillar was in pain. When Homer was turning the pages of his book, he accidentally crushed him to death. Suddenly, Homer had an evil thought in his mind. But at the same time, a good idea appeared to persuade him. But the evil seemed stronger. So Homer dug a hole to bury the caterpillar. Just then, the security service showed up. Luckily, the caterpillar was still breathing. In the end, Homer was sentenced to 200 hours in prison for attempting to kill a protected animal, serving everyone in the community.